the situation that libertarians find themselves in is both teeming with opportunity and ripe with potential change for the better, and also fleeting hope, as it seems that how Americans react to the current situation with the Trump administration and the Epstein files seem greatly disappointing, including from a Gen Z perspective. As a Gen Z male looking at the rest of my generation, it's also somewhat incredibly disappointing with our reaction with the Epstein class, but also not so disappointing also. And I'll get into that. So, first off, let's talk about what libertarians can do in the short term foreseeable future. Well, it is becoming clear to me that the trust in government institutions and quasi government institutions that are perceived to be private, but are in fact still another arm of the state apparatus, is growing distrust, which is a great thing. That's a good thing. That means there is room to work with. If people are becoming disillusioned with the current authority, it means that we can uh, accelerate the disillusionment of authority altogether. However, while there is a decrease in belief of current American ruling class authority, there is still not a decrease in the legitimacy and perceived legitimacy of authority altogether. So naturally, whenever this current iteration of the American ruling class collapses, if it collapses soon or sometime later, well, everything that is up must come down. So eventually it will, of course, to some degree, however it happens, and whenever. But once that change happens, that's the sort of change that libertarians should be looking for, to be presenting an alternative to ruling classes altogether. That is, of course, anarchy, no ruling classes. We present this alternative in flawed ways, I would say. Flawed ways. We've damaged a lot of credibility with Javier Milei because not only because of the lack of what he has done with his administration, which is some good, some bad. Like he even raised some taxes, which is ridiculous, and his support for Bibi Netanyahu and Donald Trump. But we can also distance ourselves from all of that and present a non-political solution, a non-political alternative, because right now people are feeling disillusioned with the political process, that politics can solve their problems. Libertarians presenting an alternative non-political solution to that, a way out that does not involve the rituals of politics, could be something appealing. But the problem with this, of course, is that people are also still very anti-capitalistic. And of course, when I'm using the word capitalism in this context, I'm using it in a more libertarian context. Because when people say that they hate capitalism, they also usually mean that they hate the free market. So, whether you want to use the word capitalism or not for your flavor of libertarianism, as I've talked on my own channel before about it, when people say the word capitalism, they're still employing the connotation of the free market somewhere lodged into that concept. And so, if someone says that they're against capitalism, they have to be against libertarians too. But the way that Donald Trump has gone about with carrying on the legacy of forever wars, easy money, and interventionism all around, plus his scandal with the Epstein shit, means that we can present an alternative of hard money, of no more wars, of no more interventions, and a prosecution of the Epstein class if we can too. But I'm not sure how that would exactly look like from a non-political perspective. When it comes to millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, etc., they are certainly a lost cause. It seems to be a pattern with that, of course, when someone reaches a certain age, when they reach some sort of age in real adulthood somewhere in their 20s, it seems to me like their beliefs begin to petrify. That doesn't mean that people can't change their beliefs, of course. Anyone can change their beliefs at any age. I've seen it. But beliefs seem to stabilize once you become an adult. And now Gen Z is entering into adulthood. The certain values that we have established as a generation, as we've been growing up, is starting to become solidified and will dictate what our generation will do and be and behave for the rest of our future as a generation, until we all die, of course. While this generation has remained very much anti-capitalistic, which means that there is no hope for a libertarian generation to be found in Gen Z, Gen Z can still be helpful just yet, because I believe that Gen Z has the highest disillusionment with political authority since the generation of the American Revolution. That doesn't mean that I think that Gen Z will conduct a revolution. I don't think so. I think the only way that we would have a civil war is if Trump looked for a third term. If Trump attempted a third term, I believe that could kickstart a civil war. But I don't really think a civil war would come about through other means that I can think of. I don't think people are going to rally behind. I don't think citizens are going to take up arms. If there's ever going to be a civil war, there'll be an issue with the ruling class fighting amongst itself when Trump tries to seek a third term, if he does so. If there was time for a revolution, it would have been with the Epstein shit. Hell, it would have been with the Epstein shit 5 or 6 years ago when it all came out. I mean, the thing is that when the whole Epstein shit came out, I was already like, oh, this just furthers my belief that authority and statism is evil. But this particular state, the United States government, just became a lot more evil in my eyes. Because it's pretty clear that there was some sort of cahoots with both the Democrats and the Republicans protecting Jeffrey Epstein. And of course, now that this is public information in the files, that anyone can look this up in the files and see for themselves, there should be no room for skepticism or suspicion otherwise. It should be certain now that the Democrat Party and the Republican Party are part of the Epstein class. I do appreciate what Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie has done to push for the Epstein Transparency Act. I do think that is a good thing, of course. But also, in some ways, it's going to rebuild credibility for the Democrats and the Republicans. They can voting Republican can claim, or voting Democrat can claim, if they, especially if they're voting for someone who's a Ro Khanna type or a Thomas Massie type that opposes the Epstein files, that you could still be a Democrat and a Republican without voting for the Epstein class, because Ro Khanna is not part of the Epstein class and Thomas Massie isn't part of the Epstein class, and they aren't. But the thing is that they're building credibility for the two parties that are directly involved with the Epstein class, the Republicans and the Democrats. Basically, what Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie are spiritually pushing is to reintroduce the political solution to solve this problem by voting our way out of the Epstein class, which will never happen. I think the role as libertarians, beyond the Thomas Massie types, which I won't call them a libertarian anyways, there is no libertarian Thomas Massie types. There are Thomas Massie types who seem to sometimes ally themselves with libertarians and call themselves libertarians, maybe. But that's all about gatekeeping and semantics anyways. We need to be presenting a non-political solution to this problem to warn people that politics is not going to save them this time. And the libertarian alternative should be presented to anyone who is listening. The libertarian solution being the escape from authority and aggression. That escape will have to involve building a community of like-minded libertarians together. The alternative that libertarians should present to the masses won't mean a whole lot if we don't have a community to show for it. And of course, in order to build a community, we need to get more converts, of course. In order to get more converts, of course, we need to educate people. And what you need to do is to educate people on the alternative solution, on the alternative path, the alternative choice that does not involve Democrats, Republicans, or any other flavor of statism. The alternative that will look nice in contrast with how unpopular the Trump administration is. Now, interventionism is unpopular. The tariffs is unpopular. Foreign interventionism is unpopular. People are becoming not happy with the infinite wars and even beginning to be not happy with interventionism. I actually think that it's really cool how people view tariffs now with Donald Trump. It's really cool to hear Democrats talk about how they don't like tariffs. That's really cool. But of course, at the end of the day, this is not founded on any libertarian belief. They don't believe that tariffs are bad because it violates the liberty of people. Tariffs are bad because Donald Trump. But we can turn that tariffs are bad because of Donald Trump into tariffs are bad because it violates liberty. We can turn it into that. So I think a lot of Americans right now are politically window shopping because MAGA is fractured. MAGA has been fractured over and over and over again. Their first fracture was around when the Epstein scandal came about. The second fracture was the war in Iran. And now there's a third sort of mini fracture with the AI Trump Jesus photo alienating his Christian audience and his beefing with the Pope. That makes MAGA super fractured. And I think this is ripe soil for libertarians to take advantage of in presenting the libertarian alternative. But of course, this alternative should not be focused on the older generation. The older generations are going to believe what they're going to believe. We have to be focusing on younger people, people our age. If you're listening to this and you're a young man like me, then you know what I'm talking about. Presenting that alternative to young people, not hoping for everyone to convert because that's obviously unrealistic. We're not going to find our libertarian generation in Gen Z. But what we can do is that we can further establish ourselves as an alternative so that future generations can look at us with more credibility and they can look at us with more seriousness and with more substance than previous generations. And so we could maybe even find our hope in Generation Alpha to possibly be the libertarian generation. Because Gen Z has become so anti political, they become so disillusioned with politics that politics can save their lives and save them from troubles and problems that this can very much well pass on to Generation Alpha, and I very much do believe that it can pass on to Generation Alpha. And so when we pair up disillusionment with the current political apparatus and pair that with disillusionment with statism altogether, this is where us as Gen Z libertarians need to be presenting that alternative to future generations. But I'm also thinking that Generation Alpha will become even more mentally ill than Gen Z. Gen Z is a pretty mentally ill generation. It's no disrespect, it's just kind of just the world we've grown up in and how our mentality and our mind has been conditioned by our environment and our crazy world. And with the rise of neurodivergency, with mothers having babies later in life, with we're saving more babies from death at birth, which means there's a survivor bias, which means that neurodivergent people are more likely to survive childbirth and live on. That is a contribution to the mental illness, but also the vapidness of our society, the meaning crisis, the way that our society is basically the latest iteration of feudalism, where most people have to work in slavery, and the ones who don't are the ones enslaving people. Neither of them make them happy. So, and Gen Z growing up in a dying America where everything is expensive and opportunity is gone, and there's no way to make a name for yourself or make a living for yourself beyond bare necessity, even if you can achieve that. And what also contributed to our mental illness as a generation, as Generation Z, was the internet, and the lack of proper parenting on the internet also contributed to that. But I believe it's way worse for Gen Alpha. I believe that their internet addiction, their screen addiction is going to be way worse. And the quality of the content that they're consuming, I think, is way less with the advent of AI. So I have suspicion if Generation Alpha will be up to the task of being class conscious when their brains are going to be unfortunately riddled with brain rot. But all of our brains are riddled with brain rot. It includes all the generations. This is not nothing. It's not like a particular attack on Gen Z or Gen Alpha. It's infecting all of the generations. Where we're all doom scrolling, and we're all receiving brain rot from the short form content and whatever. And I do believe that this effect on society could greatly diminish the capacity of libertarian class consciousness. But besides all of that, I just want to say, to wrap up the thoughts of this video, what you can do. When someone is talking about, for example, like advocating for protectionism, tell them that free trade amongst nations promote peace and decreases the chance for war. Talk to them about um, how the free market maximizes your subjective values, and the free market is the incubator of social cooperation and social harmony. And talk to them about how any measure of restriction or inhibition or abolition of freedom and free trade and social cooperation leads to social disintegration and social degeneration and social collapse. Teach them that the alternative to the free market is not an alternative between two beverages, but an alternative between a healthy beverage and poison, as Ludwig von Mises put it. And teach them that common sense dictates to us that the non-aggression principle is true. You don't even have to get very philosophical. You just have to say, is hurting people bad? Is murdering people bad? Is controlling people without their consent is bad? Is consent good? If you say consent is good, that you truly do value the consent of other individuals, you must allow them to be free to conduct what they see fit in their life, and that it is not right for others to invade on their privacy, on their persons or papers or property. Teach them that this creed of liberty will bring about a new social order unprecedented in human history. Teach them that the profit loss mechanism in this social order, because the profit loss mechanism is based in this libertarian creed of non aggression, that entrepreneurs and capitalists maximize exactly what consumers want. Teach them that monopolies are bad and unnecessary. When a monopoly takes hold of such a necessary public good, such as water, or such as electricity, or such as land, when it's monopolized by some sort of private agent of the government or government itself, that it creates an incentive where they now have the ability to control the supply of the resource that they have a monopoly over. Teach them that the free market is not when monopolies take over, but rather when monopolies die. Teach them that monopolies are conditioned by government because government is itself a monopoly. It is itself a monopoly on justice. And when you have a monopoly on justice, you have the desire for control and power and slavery. And that when this monopoly extends its tyrannical octopus tentacle hands into other parts of the social fabric of the economy, that it extends this evil throughout the entire society. When there is no competition, when you have a monopoly, you start to give less fucks, of course. In fact, it's not even just about giving less fucks. It could also mean about expropriating and abusing and taking advantage of people because their only option is you as the monopoly. And teach them that monopolies are not naturally occurring things, but rather are man made constructs that come about through aggression, through violating the consent of others, through the invasion of others. If people really were consistent about how they valued consent, um, they would extend this to all ways of life, to all facets of life, to all institutions, to all social mechanisms. If any of them ask, like, for example, oh, how do we build the roads? Of course. How do we do this and that and this and that and this and that? How do we do such and such in libertarian society? You know what's the best way to answer that question? Ask them, how do they think they're going to solve that issue? Because it's important to keep the message that anarchism is not a political system, of course. It's not a system at all. It's a philosophy, and the philosophy is of mutual cooperation without the threat of slavery. Ask them, how does the infrastructure of roads or infrastructure in general requires any sort of expropriation or slavery or robbery or wars? Ask them, how does war, the destruction of human life and human production, the destruction of lives and a way of life, how does that promote prosperity? Teach people the real motive behind what government does and their behaviors and actions, that they are seeking to enrich a minority, a small ruling class for themselves at the expense of you. And they're hoping on you to be a dope and to be duped into believing what they're saying, that somehow it is beneficial for you too. And also recognize when you're starting to also recognize when people are participating in tribalism, that no longer are they seeking to maximize humanity as a whole race as an international effort, but rather are seeking to enrich in their own group at the expense of other groups and point out how evil that is, such as the issue of immigration. Do not hold back against individuals who want restricted immigration. Call them out that they are proposing some sort of uh, metaphysical segregation of individuals where some individuals have rights and other individuals don't have the same rights. Educate them that that's nonsense, that if there's any sense of human rights, it must be equal to all humans. Educate people that the only forms of human rights that exist are only negative rights and not positive rights. You do not have a right to something. You do not have a right to healthcare. You do not have a right to housing. You have a right to keep and bear arms. You have a negative right from invasion. You have a right to form a community, a mutual aid community where you can help each other out, including such as healthcare and shelter and food and well-being, that you have a right from the invasion of government to impede you on such a project, but you do not have a right to healthcare. You don't have a right to rob someone, to hire government out, to rob people through taxpayers, and to give you free healthcare, quote unquote, free healthcare. Most people will not listen to you, but you're not doing it for the people who won't listen. You're doing it for the people who will listen. We're not going to find liberty probably in our lifetime. It probably will take hundreds or thousands of years, or we could see it in our lifetime, I hope, but I'm not holding my breath for it. What you need to be doing is that you need to be communicating for the children of the future. You need to be communicating for all people, not just for the people who are just right in there, right in front of you, listening to you. You have to be advocating as if the entire future is listening to you, because the future is. The future people will see us and see our efforts, and they'll be proud of it, because one day we will win. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching.